GEC, or Global Environment Centre, is a Malaysian non-profit organisation which was established in 1998, about 20 years ago. Our focus is to protect, safeguard the global environment. We are working currently in about 10 countries, most of the ASEAN member states, but also China.
GEC is the NGO that do the talk. We meant what we are doing, and we are doing what we say.
We don't just work on one project with one partner. We try to work with communities, government and private sector together. We form coalitions or partnerships between these different stakeholders. We don't make reports because only with practical results can we bring different stakeholders to be active, engaged.
Through the civic science concept or approach, where the key focus is empowerment and engagement of the stakeholders, especially the local community.
We believe we won't be there forever. And after we implement that activity, we need someone to carry forward.
For the last 18 years, GEC through the River Care program have worked actively on river and water resource protection and also conservation in Malaysia. GEC's River Care program is about integrated river basin management program. It focuses on the sustainable river management benefiting all, including the environment.
Peatlands are a very key ecosystem, particularly in the ASEAN region, and we're working with the 10 ASEAN member states to manage the peatland areas and to prevent fire and transboundary haze.
Forest and coastal programs promotes and support the sustainable management of the forest and wetland ecosystem, as well as rehabilitation the degraded site and organizing community-based, school student-based awareness programs in order to protect and conserve the priceless biodiversity and mitigate climate change. The rehabilitation of North Selangor Peatlands forests through community-based action projects mainly promote and emphasize on the sustainable management and wise use of the forests and surrounding areas to sustain the local needs.
The last program is the Outreach and Partnership Program, where we're working with partners all over the world to outreach and engage and get communities and other stakeholders to safeguard the global environment.
GEC will never take up any project on event base or on an economic base. It's all about the people and environment.
If we heal our earth, we will heal ourselves.
We managed to explain and to some extent empower them what are the role they can play and how to reconnect them to the nature.
We were brought into this world not to exploit it, but to act as the guardians of this planet. GEC, or Global Environment Centre, is a Malaysian non-profit organisation which was established in 1998, about 20 years ago. Our focus is to protect, safeguard the global environment. We are working currently in about 10 countries, most of the ASEAN member states, but also China.
GEC is the NGO that do the talk. We meant what we are doing, and we are doing what we say.
We don't just work on one project with one partner. We try to work with communities, government and private sector together. We form coalitions or partnerships between these different stakeholders. We don't make reports because only with practical results can we bring different stakeholders to be active, engaged.
Through the civic science concept or approach, where the key focus is empowerment and engagement of the stakeholders, especially the local community.
We believe we won't be there forever. After we implement that activity, we need someone to carry forward.
For the last 18 years, GEC through the River Care program have worked actively on river and water resource protection and also conservation in Malaysia. GEC's River Care program is about integrated river basin management program. It focuses on the sustainable river management benefiting all, including the environment.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nick Amer, and welcome to the International University of Malaya Wales Sustainable Green Over Smokescreen created by the IUNW Student Council. Let me brief everyone about our event. This event aims to address the mounting environmental concern known as the climate emergency under the theme of IUNW Sustainable. Environmental consciousness is hoped to be achieved through a forum. In Module 1, that aims to provide a comprehensive background to the hurdles in effective implementation of sustainable policies on the government and also corporate level, along with methods for individuals to pressure governments and corporates to implement sustainable policies. In Module 2, the audience will be exposed to ways they could lead a more environmentally sustainable lifestyle, and to remove the stigma that lifestyle being elitist and unattainable to the common people. Let me also introduce the speakers for the two modules. For the first module, Ms. Jasmine Irisha from UNICEF will be joining us, as well as Ms. Sakina Omar from Greenpeace Malaysia. It will also be moderated by Mr. Reza from MYD Climate. The second module will have these speakers, Mr. Aidil Iman, an advocate for environmental justice, climate action, and nature conservation, and as well as Ms. Nik Suzila from Cloth Malaysia Sendirian Berhad, and it will be moderated by Ms. Fatin Hamzah from Youth United for Earth. Without further ado, I would like to start the event with a speech from the IUNW Student Council President, Latifa Rafat. Please welcome her.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum and good day to you all. It is an honor to be here today to be present with this wonderful team to introduce Green Over Smoke Screens by IUMW Sustainable to represent the Student Council and the International University of Malaya Wales. It is a true pride to be a part of this advocacy for the environment, to have worked on the content research and to be given this speech today. I salute every member of this events committee, especially the director, Alia, vice director, Nisma, and head of marketing, Jeffrey, as well. While I'm mentioning honor and pride, it occurs to me that while it is great that there are sides promoting the betterment of the environment, the deplorable condition that the environment is in today in itself is an overwhelming source of disgrace and an indication of the failure of humanity as a whole. Not saying this as an attempt to hinder spirits, but as an attempt to highlight that the graver the disgrace or the failure being fought against, the greater the significance and vitality of the fight. As someone from Egypt and the Middle East, I grew up knowing very well what it means that in the age of a nation aged more than 7,000 years old, 10 years are practically nothing. Today, this earth, 4.5 billion years old, has about 10 years or so before the damage being done to its climate is irreversible. On a human scale, that is like telling someone they have only a few days to live. And because I grew up in the Middle East, I also know that conquerors, invaders, bombard and shatter land in war with chemicals and heavy weaponry without thinking, because it is ultimately not theirs and the consequences will not be faced by them later on. Similarly, or comparatively, the people in power about the decisions that affect climate change will suffer the consequences much, much later than everyone else. And that is why they do not care as much or at all, and that is why it is our job to care. This is why today, as I introduce this initiative aiming to address the audience and bring awareness about the current situation, the corporate greenwashing, the government aversion of responsibility, and what role we can play in all of this, I urge you all to understand the heaviness of what it all represents, and by extension, the honor it carries to shoot any arrow in this battle. In the UN meeting in 2019, General Assembly President Maria Fernandez Espinosa Gases urged states to act responsibly because climate justice is intergenerational justice. That is the scale of this dynamic, and whilst, of course, not individuals like us, it is not individuals like us that control the dynamic in the existence of capitalist and tyrannic governments, greedy multi-billion-dollar corporations, and inadequate law-making policies. It is our hope that through the awareness we bring today to you, to this generation, that better governments, better politicians, better lawmakers, and better CEOs will emerge in the future and enhance the betterment of the environment and enhance the fight to stop or to reverse the effects of climate change. With this, I present to you IUMW Sustainable and this forum, Greens Over Smokescreens, because unlike the resources on this earth, our hope, hopefully, is unlimited and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Latifa Rafat, for that wonderful speech. Unfortunately, Maya Karin is unable to join the event today due to her being unwell, and we hope that she recovers quickly. We would like to also apologize for any inconveniences. Now, I'd like to talk a minute or two about the GEC donation platform and a little bit about GEC. GEC has undertaken more than 150 projects successfully in more than 15 countries. And we hope everyone here can help to contribute to the cause by donating to the link. Or also, if you look down here, you can donate to, you can go to the INW Student Council Instagram page. You can click on the link and donate as you see fit. Once again, all the donation goes straight into GEC to help save the planet. Now, why GEC? Well, it is formally recognized by the Malaysian government and ASEAN for its pioneering work in mangrove, peat swamp forests, river and coastal management and community engagement. GEC has also developed various environmental educational programs such as River Ranger, Smart Ranger, and many initiatives and educational programs that help benefit the forest, and also it's been adopted and endorsed by the Ministry of Education and other government agencies. GEC has also established four open education centers for rivers. These centers serve as river education and conservation center for the public. And also it allows them to learn about the importance of local waterways and empower them to protect the waterways from pollution. These open classrooms has benefited approximately 5,000 people. And lastly, GEC has established the National River Care Fund, NRCF, which has channeled approximately RM 250,000 to 40 projects and trainings for local communities, and also for the nonprofit organizations in river care activities. Now, they have touched on the riverside and they have done a lot more in the forest and whatsoever. So they are a very, very willing NGO. And I think we should all take part in saving our planet, especially during these tough times of the pandemic. And apart from donating, there are also other ways that you guys can help with the cause. From some examples that I can give, when you go shopping for your groceries, bring your own recycle bag or your shopping bag, and do not use the plastics that the supermarkets provide, or they will charge you the 20 cents per liter, but avoid doing that as you'll save the environment better. And as well as if you go for a McDonald's run and grab any, make sure you grab the paper straw and avoid using the plastic straws. And lastly, the recycling items. When you're throwing out the trash, make sure you separate the recycle items and plastics. A little of this can go a long way to help save our planet. Now, enough of that. Let's go to the main event, which is the modules. I'd like to introduce the first module, which is the Green Code, and especially bring on our speakers for today. Now, our first speakers for the first module are Miss Jasmine Irisha from UNICEF, and also Miss Sakina Omar from Greenpeace Malaysia. And lastly, the module will be moderated by Mr. Reza from MYD Climate. So I would like to invite our speakers and moderator.
Hello and good afternoon. It is such an honor to be here. Thank you to the Student Council of IUMW Wales for hosting this event and inviting us. My name is Reza, and I will keep this introduction brief because we have a very interesting panel today, and I don't want to take more of your time. I am a focal point of MYD, which is a fully volunteer-led organization established in 2015 to track negotiations at COP. We also build capacity among Malaysian youths to understand climate policy and engage with policymakers. So without further ado, I introduce Ms. Jasmine Risha to give her self-introduction.
Thanks, Reza. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine. I'm from UNICEF Malaysia. I am the Climate and Environment Consultant. I'm supposed to introduce myself, yeah? Okay, so I'll just get into it. So I generally help mobilize young people in climate action. And prior to my position here at UNICEF, I have held a number of positions previously in the realm of research world, namely in University Science Malaysia, Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development, as well as the Earth Institute at Columbia University. I'll just quickly introduce you about what we do at UNICEF in the Climate and Environment Program. So the Climate and Environment portfolio at UNICEF Malaysia is relatively new. It's about a year plus now, and it has 4 priority pillars. The first one is evidence generation. So at UNICEF Malaysia, when we talk about climate change and environmental degradation issues, we see it from a perspective of children's rights. So children's rights to a safe, clean, and healthy and sustainable environment. So when we talk about evidence generation, for example, we're here to collaborate and work together with research institutions, universities, and experts to gain data and also produce more evidence about how climate change impacts children in terms of their health and in terms of their rights to the future. Secondly is on child-sensitive climate policies. So we view climate policies in terms of again, children's rights. So how certain climate policies at the national level actually addresses children and young people at large. Thirdly is on education and awareness. So when we talk about climate change and children, towards what extent does it include climate education, environmental education, and how then in turn we build more awareness around it. And fourthly is innovative solutions and youth participation. So when we talk about climate change, children, and addressing the issues surrounding it, how do we best place solutions at the forefront, innovatively, creatively, and inclusively, addressing children as one of the key stakeholders, and also how do we get youth on board in terms of inclusive and holistic participation when it comes to climate decision-making and policy-making processes. I'll stop here first and over back to you, Reza.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. And next, Sakina from Greenpeace. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, thanks, Reza. And hi, Jasmine. So I'm Sakina. I'm from Greenpeace Malaysia. I'm the public engagement campaigner. So what I do in Greenpeace Malaysia is lately I've been doing the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve issue. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later. And then we also, as an office, we do work on a certain other campaigns such as plastic waste trade, the imported plastic waste trade issue, plastic lifestyle also. And then we also do haze issue involving transboundary haze from Indonesia. And yeah, the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve is a local forest issue. And you know, anything coming up. Yeah, we're quite a small office right now. In Malaysia, we've just established an office in 2017, so it's pretty new still. And we're part of Greenpeace Southeast Asia. So maybe intro a little bit about Greenpeace if maybe some people are unfamiliar with Greenpeace. Greenpeace is an international organization, although in Malaysia we're part of the Greenpeace Southeast Asia region. So what we do here is mostly we campaign. It's a campaigning organization, so we do campaigns. Maybe people are more familiar with seeing the international side. Maybe some involved in whaling and nuclear climbing here and there, you can see. But Malaysia, we haven't really gotten to that level yet. What we do is we have a few principles. So we always like non-violence. So we practice non-violence from our end. We cannot really, I guess, control what the other side responds with. But from our end, we always go with non-violence. And then we also have a few principles that we don't have any permanent friends or foes, which means like such as maybe a corporation A is doing good on plastic end, but they're not doing very well on palm oil. So there's we don't take sides, like whatever the issue is at that time, and whatever the corporation or government is doing at that time, that's what we respond to. And then we also are independent. So it's very important that we're independent organization. So when we do campaigning, there's no bias or anything holding us back. So which is why we do, when we in Malaysia, we do a fundraising also, and we only take money from individuals. So we don't take any money from corporations or government. So that ensures our independence, part of our module. And then we also try to promote solutions whenever we can, of course, because like we don't want to just talk about a problem. We want to promote solutions so that we can get to where we want to be. So I think I don't have much to say. Back to you, Reza.
Thank you, Sakina, and Jasmine, for your introduction. So today we're here to discuss the Green Code, which is a topic given to us by IUMW Sustainable. And there are 4 sections that we're going to cover today, with the overarching goal of giving our audience a little bit of information about hurdles to effective implementation of sustainable policies at the government and corporate level. And we'll also cover, at the end, methods that individuals can use to pressure governments or companies to take action faster. So the 4 sections that we'll be discussing today, I can't think of a better panel to discuss with, is that they have to be solutions oriented. We're also going to be looking at the effectiveness of environmental policies in Malaysia from the perspective of environmental issues like, for example, Kuala Langat, and corporate environmental accountability, something that Sakina would have a lot of experience in assessing. And lastly, for both speakers, we'll be talking about the potential of individuals to pressure governments and companies to adopt sustainable policies. So with all these topics in mind, I think we should first let the speakers give their thoughts on how we can approach this topic on the Green Code. So without further ado, do any of the speakers want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Before that, speaking of green coat, I like how we're kind of like color coordinated, like literally wearing a green coat, huh? But anyway, on the actual topic itself, talking about green coat, and I think the larger overarching title is Green Over Smokescreens Forum. I think this is pretty apt. Because nowadays there are a lot of surrounding issues of climate change, because climate change, when we talk about it, it's not just concerning the climate science anymore, even though we have multiple reports released, like the recently released IPCC report, which stated that we actually are running out of time. We're now on the pathway of 1.1 to 1.2 degrees Celsius when we're supposed to have a limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that is actually very alarming. And even the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres quoted that it is a code red for humanity, which goes to show how severe the current situation is and how we really need to act fast. We need urgent action now in terms to actually have a chance to tackle this climate crisis collectively, right? Yeah, and I think moving further, just a step beyond that, the climate crisis is a children's rights crisis. It is actually an intersectional issue as well. It concerns intergenerational equity, which means that it concerns the most vulnerable population, the most marginalized population. And from where I'm coming from, and the work that I do, this particularly includes children, but children from various and diverse backgrounds, children from the B40 community, from the Orang Asli communities, indigenous communities, children with disabilities, refugees and migrants. So a wide array of background and population. in Malaysia. So we have a lot to cover today. I know the moderator has also prepared some prompts, so I won't go into details just yet. I'll let Sakina to sort of share her thoughts on the green code that we're wearing and that we're discussing today.
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. So yeah, when I think about the overarching theme, green over smoke screen, of course, greenwashing comes in mind. So I think yeah, that's a lot to unpack there in terms of greenwashing and what corporations are doing right now. Because like you mentioned about the IPCC report and everything, yeah, it's a code red. So but the thing is sometimes when we see action being taken, we want to know whether it's just the smoke screen, whether it's just a layer of, you know, to show yes we're taking some action, but is there any action actually being done on the back end, you know, is it actually changing anything? So yeah, I think that's where we're gonna, I think let's just dive in.
Okay, thanks so much. So I'm going to open this with a general question. So solution-oriented policies are kind of a new buzzword around policymaking. One definition of it is to look past your current problems to find solutions using maybe a root cause analysis, but basically identifying and solving a problem at source. So I would like to ask Jasmine, how do you approach a solutions-oriented approach in your line of work at UNICEF?
Thanks, Reza, and thanks, Sakina. I know she's just so excited to dive right in on the questions, right? So regarding the question that's posed by Reza on being solution-oriented, I just wanted to share a bit about the work that we do here at UNICEF Malaysia and the report that we published last year in November 2020 called the Change for Climate Report. I'm not sure if I can drop any links here, but you can just like Google up Change for Climate Report by UNICEF Malaysia. They'll surely pop up. So basically, the key findings of this report is actually derived from a national youth climate change survey that we conducted that collected around 1,400 respondents from young people in Malaysia. And the key finding from the report states that 92% of young people in Malaysia think that climate change is a crisis. So this is pretty big, right? It's a pretty big deal. It's quite a majority. But when we dive a bit further, when we look like, you know, at another layer deeper, we can see that, you know, a lot of them, even though they self-initiated, about 9 in 10 youth already are taking individual actions to address climate change. But they kind of like lies at like the end of like two very varying spectrum. On one end, like you have people who are very passionate, people who are out there doing their own thing, taking the public transportation, going to climate protests, saying no to plastics. But the other end, we also have young people who are as equally aware, but they kind of just feel a bit helpless and do not know where to start when it comes to tackling climate issues. So, and I think this is kind of a common theme that kind of sort of affects young people in general. It's called eco-anxiety. So these are where young people think that, you know, climate change is such a big issue. It's so overwhelming that it personally affects them emotionally as well. And they feel as though they're just one person who can't do anything about it because it's such a huge issue. And this is where we will discuss a bit more further about, you know, smokescreen and, you know, why is it why is it implied that, you know, our perspective is in that way, is in that sense. But the good thing about this report is that we really went into the root cause of the general sentiments and perceptions of climate change issues and environmental degradation issues when it comes to their impacts on young people in Malaysia. And this is where, you know, addressing or like finding out what are the causes and what do they think in general, we can sort of like tease out, you know, multiple solutions or recommendations that we can implement to address these issues at hand. So bearing in mind, so firstly, you know, we think about who is the end audience, like who are we trying to address? So we know that we are surveying young people in Malaysia, but the outcome means that, you know, it's not necessarily targeted to young people in Malaysia specifically, but when it comes to climate crisis, we need all hands on deck. We need a collaboration and intersectoral partnerships in terms of getting things moving and having all sectors on board in addressing the issue. So some of the solutions or recommendations that we have identified sort of was divided into three sections. Firstly is on education, about how we can use education as a tool to educate and raise awareness for young people when it comes to addressing the climate crisis. As we all know, we don't have a dedicated climate or environmental education curriculum that is specific, but climate change is being integrated and embedded within multiple subjects such as science, biology, geography, chemistry, physics. Secondly, is on enabling environment, is to facilitate more youth-led climate policies. So how do we involve young people more into the conversations and also the wider process of policy making? So how do we actually build platforms to bridge the gap between youth and also policymakers so that they can have a common dedicated space to discuss about how these issues actually impact young people and children in Malaysia. There's another thing which is surrounding the narratives on the climate crisis. As we are more generally aware of, like climate crisis is more towards, I mean, the stories that we hear are more commonly on a global scale, right? We hear about the ice caps melting, we hear about the wildfires in California, tapi how is climate change affecting us in our own backyard? What about the flooding? What about the haze? This is where I believe Sakina will elaborate more after this. So how do we localize climate narratives and climate issues in a way that everyday children would be able to understand and being able to identify that this phenomena is actually a cause of climate change? And last but not least is on empowerment. And the third point is to provide more platforms for youth to be engaged with and also to allocate resources, capacity building, and also capacity building in terms of knowledge and also financial assistance when it comes to implementing more climate activities and also more trainings when it comes to knowledge and also activities when it comes to community building in a larger communal scale. I'll pause here in case, Teresa, you have any follow-ups or Sakina would like to add on.
Yes, I would actually like to ask Sakina. So, what does solution-oriented approach mean for you in your line of work as an environmental campaigner?
Thanks. Yeah, very good. For me, solution-oriented, I think involves like we do have to do investigation on certain issues like plastic waste trade issue. We do a lot of investigation before we come out with any kind of report. We do a little bit of science testing, taking samples and stuff like that, taking pictures. I think this is touching on what Jasmine said, like sometimes people can feel like a sense of helplessness and what they can do. I think the if I can give some suggestion, the easiest thing you can do is what we call bearing witness in Greenpeace. It might be like unfamiliar terms, but basically what it means is like if you see something happening, like you see maybe a pile of trash where it shouldn't be, take a picture and then report it to the authorities. There are there are ways that we can mitigate all these things together. There are actually government have all these ways that you can report this, although maybe it's not so well known to the public, and it might need like further I think it to be like more public friendly. It could be more public friendly, definitely. But yeah, there are ways that you can help no matter how small it is. So I think definitely bearing witness is one thing that we can do as just public. Whatever you see, take a picture. Nowadays everyone has a camera phone, so that's really an advantage nowadays because I think a lot of the things happening are unreported, or like when we see like there are the cases of the water pollution, like say just taking as an example, when it already happens, then water get cut off and then they have to clean and everything. But actually the thing is happening behind, something is happening there, and then either people are seeing it or not. people might be seeing it, but they're not sure what it is or something, you know. So if you see something, always take picture. It's always good to have a record of it. And something else about solution oriented, I think, yeah, looking at the root cause of issues is definitely important. I can give example like for palm oil, the transboundary haze, right? Maybe some people might think of it as Indonesian problem, or they're just causing trouble for us and it's blowing our way. But actually, if you see the root cause, those plantations in Indonesia, they are either co-owned or by Malaysian companies. So it's not entirely Indonesia or Indonesian companies' problem. It's a transboundary haze issue, and it's also I guess transboundary problem. So it's not just one country's problem. It's Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. We're all interlinked in this, and so if we want to find a solution for this, I think we need to work together. That's definitely something that needs to happen between countries and between corporations. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say.
Thank you so much for sharing. This is actually interesting that from the discussion so far, we have different approaches to being solution oriented by, for example, bearing witness to report a problem, or collecting data and doing your research so that you can identify justifications or causes for those problems, or even, as Jasmine does, creating spaces that solutions can emerge through discussion, creativity, and employing harnessing the potential of youth to decide their future. I think that all of these can be maybe synthesized and segue into our next discussion about environmental policies as filling in the gaps. There are mismatches or structural issues that your organizations are trying to identify, and by highlighting the issues with data and with solutions, or both, you are trying to hasten a process of environmental policy creation, strengthening, or maybe even relook at the problem because it may be interlinked with other things. So we are moving to how do you assess the effectiveness of environmental policies? So I would like to ask you, what are some considerations that we need to have as people who look at environmental policy that in the design of new policies? How do we know that it's effective or actually going to make a difference towards the issues that you are campaigning for?
Thanks, Reza. I can hop on the answer for the part where you asked on filling the gaps in terms of effective climate policy making. I think for this, we kind of have to look into how the stakeholder engagement process is being done before a certain policy is being formulated or being formed. So for this, for example, I can give like children, and it's actually a known fact that children and young people are not properly engaged when it comes to climate policy making or decision making processes. And I think also, if you want, you can share a bit about your experience from the Malaysian Youth Delegation, because I know you're actively involved in the stakeholder engagements as well. But what we're trying to address is, as UNICEF, is how do we further build more platforms or a specific and dedicated platform that young people and children can be engaged with when it comes to climate policy. And also when we sort of review or reflect upon the institutionalization of how our ministerial government structure is sort of being set up, right? Climate change issue is cross-cutting and impacts all of the ministries, even though climate change is housed under or is the responsibility of CASA, which is the Ministry of Environment and Water. In fact, stakeholders like children were placed in the Ministry of Women, Community and Family Development, and also like Ministry of Youth and Sports. But all these different ministries could really come together to say like, hey, like what is the most effective climate policy for young people, for example, right? So we need to sort of streamline the institutionalization process when it comes to climate policy from this angle. And that is something that is very severely lacking now. Just to give some data from the previous NDC submission, I'm not talking about the current NDC submission. So from the first NDC submission, there was only 42% of inclusion of children mentioned between all of the countries or parties that submitted their NDC to the UNFCCC. So NDC, the nationally determined contributions, are actually the climate commitments made by countries for them to report to the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this is where countries put out their commitment and their pledges saying that they're going to reduce a certain amount of carbon emission or carbon intensity by a certain year for that particular country, right? And that's the same as gender, actually, with 42% of NDCs are only gender inclusive, and that's a very low number. And when I say inclusive, it means just a mention of children, just a mention of women, but not necessarily means that it actually addresses issues pertaining children or women, or even indigenous community, for example. So that's the reality that we have right now. We don't really have very sufficient data or what is being submitted yet for this current NDC round for 2021. But we will see, we will anticipate what is going on and what is being discussed at COP26. And I think we'll know very soon now, since it will be happening in like 2 months' time.
Thank you, Jasmine. And thank you for highlighting that nationally determined contributions shouldn't only be about absolute emissions reductions, but also be intersectional and consider the stakeholders who will be affected by climate change in their formulation and design. On the consultations that you mentioned, yes, MYD as an organization that regularly engages with Ministry of Water and Environment does get invited to consultations along with many other NGOs. In those spaces, we find that I can speak from my perspective, maybe not the perspective of MYD, that there are many concerns that are actually shared among different environmental organizations in the consultation. There seem to be many similar opinions reappearing, for example, from Sabah, Malaysia, or from Greenpeace. So maybe I would like to give Sakina the chance to address this prompt. What do you think are the considerations that need to be taken into account by policymakers when designing effective environmental policies?
Thanks, Reza. Yeah, I think, thanks, Jasmine. Like, you already outlined very beautifully. I just want to maybe jump in on the policies that we already have. Some of it is really, really good, but the problem that we see across it is implementation, really. So we have some of the good policies, but somehow it's not being implemented. Not being implemented properly. So that's one of the areas that government could look into, like more implementation, monitoring and stuff like that. So this policies that we already have is being thoroughly used in a full way. So yeah, I think that's that's what I want to mention. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So a key or goal for this module, this section, is actually to decode something that was quoted here in the concept known as theatrics and jargon. So I understand that in the environmental space, there's lots of jargon, like NDC right there, and jargon for us. But not everyone might be familiar with the kind of language, not just the language used, but the communication tactics used to mask effective environmental policy or ineffective environmental policy as something good. So I'd like to bring up something that I've read recently by Professor William Lamb at Cambridge. So he and a few other academics created a paper recently called The Discourses of Delay. They identified 4 methods that are commonly used to stall or delay efforts to address environmental issues. Let me just read the 4 of them, and we'll get to the prompt. So the first is redirecting responsibility. This is the argument that someone else should act first. And it's often something you see, for example, in the developing versus developed nations argument at the UNFCCC. Next is pushing non-transformative solutions. So because disruptive change, or for example, going completely electric is so sudden, we should incrementally go there. So that's why you see solutions that are somewhere between the current infrastructure and the future green infrastructure that we need being pushed out. And next is emphasizing downsides. So this is a tactic used to show that something, if proposed, would be too expensive, or it would not work socially. And the final tactic, which is quite nihilistic, is just to say surrender. Because there's so little we can do, we might as well just surrender that climate change is inevitable, which I guess both of you have touched on in the feeling that many people can get that they have very little power in this matter. So my prompt is, do you see these discourses of delay being used in your line of work, and how can we inform the audience to recognize them when they are being used? So any of you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I can go first. So I also read by this professor, Michael Eman, from the Penn State University. He's a climate scientist. And just to paraphrase what he wrote, to quote him, he said that the greatest threat to humanity right now is not climate denial anymore. It's climate delayism and climate doomism, which means that seeing climate as the end to everything, like, oh my god, climate change is happening, there's nothing we can do anyway, or like oh, we're just one person, like, there's nothing we can do about it. The notion of like, oh, we're going to die anyway. So that's actually a very false narrative and false hope, because it sort of diminishes and minimalize the extent of our work, and also what we can actually do to tackle the climate crisis. And also, like, when it comes to young people, right? So young people, children, youth, although we are at the forefront facing the brunt of the climate crisis, we are no longer passive victims. We are actually in charge, at the forefront. We are the ones who are proactively taking action to combat the climate crisis. We're taking a proactive stance, saying that yes, we recognize that climate change is a crisis, and that we can do something about it, which gives me a lot of hope, because I know a lot of people tend to get pessimistic because of the whole narrative that we are constantly getting all these climate disasters. Like every year is constantly the hottest year of the record, right? But in reality, we can take drastic actions and take urgent actions to make a change if we have the political will, and if we have the urgency to implement our policies, and the urgency to implement our policies. So that's a few things, my few thoughts on it. And as I said, like, I know a lot of people are pessimistic, but generally, because I work with young people every day, I'm on social media every day. I see how young people mobilize. They are working now and acting faster now than ever. But young people can't do it alone. We can make the loudest noise, yes, but we can't do everything by ourselves. We need all hands on deck, and we need everyone on board in working together in tackling this climate crisis.
Yeah, I agree with Jasmine. Yeah, definitely. And those discourses of delay that you talk about, Reza, is definitely reflective of greenwashing tactics that we see a lot of corporations do, redirecting responsibility. We see a lot of corporations that are responsible for most of the trash in the world, and then they're coming out with ads saying recycle, which is funny because it's your trash. But yeah, so we're pushing for more corporate responsibility on their end, so extended producer responsibility. There's another jargon word, EPR, extended producer responsibility, that example, like in the old days when you go to mama stalls, there you drink Coca-Cola from a glass bottle, and they actually pick them up and then wash, sterilize, wash them, and then refill them and then come back to the store. But nowadays, there's a cheap and easy solutions for the corporations. Plastic bottles, they just package it, they just send it over and then forget about it. They don't do the circular economy anymore, which is yeah, it's more profit for them, but it's really, really bad for the environment. So I think what we want to do is like, how do we kind of get them to see the humanity part of it? Like, you're also living on this planet. We don't really, how do you justify destroying it for a few bucks? I mean, it's not a few bucks; it's a lot of money, but yeah.
Can I just add on a bit more, because you talk about like corporate responsibility. I came across a really good infographic by Kami, Climate Action Malaysia, which demystify real zero versus net zero, because one of the problems and also very rooted cause of climate delays is big corporations, or like the more developed countries in the global north saying that we have time. Therefore, masking or, smoke screening their way through the climate crisis, they will go on polluting more, but saying that, when we're doing this, we have like this CSR program, or like, we have this net zero pledge by 2050. But like, towards what extent is that just, good green PR? Or if they're even committed in actually implementing the pledges that they said in the first place.
This is actually a great segue to the third point, which is corporate environmental accountability. So thank you, Jasmine, for bringing up that infographic by Kami, and that the responsibility that highlights the responsibility that corporations or other companies bear in causing environmental harm. But we know, for example, the Carbon Majors report by the Carbon Majors report showed that 100 companies are responsible for over 70% of global emissions, at least between 1980 and 2015. And the same report, more than half of global industrial greenhouse gases can be traced to just 25 corporate and state producers. So with all of the talk about real zero, net zero, more so net zero right now, I would like to ask you first to explain real zero, net zero for our audience, because I think that's also another jargon that many people would not get. And the second is, with all of these good, even though there are good actors that are actively, disclosing their carbon inventories and trying to move the needle forward in terms of corporate environmental responsibility and social performance, is it significant enough to have an impact on global temperatures, which is, the end goal of environmental policy, if we have, 100 companies causing 70% of all the pollution, and basically their entire business model is tied to creating this pollution? So do share your thoughts. Maybe we can start with Sakina, since this is something that you lobby in a lot. Thank you.
Thanks. So I mentioned real zero and net zero. So I think I'm not a very scientific person, so I'll also say it in very layman's terms. So real zero, these terms are very. I actually have a background in accounting, and so it's a very like accounting term, really. It's basically if you can kind of manipulate the numbers in the books and somehow get a zero, that's considered a zero. So what the example I would give for real zero is, you actually stopping let's say a fossil fuel company moving to fully solar. That's a real zero, right? So if you're saying net zero, it's like they're saying, oh, we'll keep doing this, but for every liter that you pump fuel, we're gonna plant one tree. So does it make it okay? It's good that you're planting trees, but at the same time, like, you are still pumping the fossil fuel, so it's not really a real solution. You're just it's what we're talking about. This is the smoke screen that we're talking about right here. So it's an accounting jargon. How do you make it look nice for people? What else did you talk about just now?
The second question is, even with all these initiatives like corporate environmental reporting, greenhouse gas reporting, is it enough to move the needle if 100 companies basically control 70% of our emissions as a civilization?
So I guess if the big companies move their production to actual real zero, yes, it would definitely make a huge dent. But maybe talking about in, let's say, maybe not individual level, but let's say I talk about in like middle to small business level. What if they feel like, okay, what's the point? If they see this kind of statistics, like, what's the point if I do something about it? It's not going to move anything. It's like barely 0%. But I think that's a wrong narrative. Like another, even though, yeah, definitely, these big corporations are the ones, with the big chunks of the percentage. If we, the rest of us didn't do anything about it also, like, what if like 10,000 of those small businesses think the same way, then we won't really move anything. So I think doesn't matter whether the big corporations move their needle or not. Like we do what we can, where we can. So also at the same time, of course, we do need to pressure those companies. So like a lot of the things that Greenpeace does is we try to mobilize people power, we call it, where people and their power, whether it's your voice on social media or your purchasing power. It's a vote technically, not just, voting is not just political. It's also like whatever you buy, your yeah, where you're spending the time, where you're spending your money is very important. Show off, like, do you support this corporation and stuff like that. And if you're buying that corporation's products, you should have a right as a consumer to tell them, I don't like the way you do this and that, so please change. And if enough people say that, we believe that the corporation would listen, because that is where the pool of them, if they lose their profit, if they lose the customers, that's bad for them. So definitely that's the thing that we can use, people power. Yeah.
Okay, so Jasmine, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to add a bit about role of CSOs and civil society in terms of holding corporations or even governments accountable for their actions, because even from a children's rights perspective, we have the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which says that children have a right to a safe and clean and healthy environment. Actually, quite recently, about early this year, last year, I was involved with putting together the ASEAN policy guidance for children's rights to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And within that policy guidance has a section on business and children's rights. So putting children at the forefront and having, rights to clean air, rights to play outside, those are actually a threat or at stake if these big companies are keeping on polluting, because then we won't, not just us, but our children won't have the access to all these heritage and also environment. But I think also this one begs a bigger question, because even internationally, a lot of young people are suing big corporates and also governments for denying their rights to a clean future. Even now in Malaysia, the air that we breathe in every day is actually below the air quality level that is supposed to be clean, as directed by the World Health Organization. So these are the real things that we normally overlook, or we don't really realize, but it's actually impacting our everyday life and our health in the long-term crisis.
Thank you for that add-on. Yes, so while there is a fiduciary duty of companies to maximize the returns for their shareholders, to manage the funds that have been entrusted to them, to create more money and to pay off the people who have invested in them, I think it's also, as you've mentioned, Jasmine, comes into tension with perhaps the rights of humans to, for example, a healthy environment, or even children to intergenerational equity. Will there be any resources left out, for example, if we keep extracting them at the rate we are using today? So when we think about corporations adopting sustainability practices, I know that we see, for example, eco labels. We see adoption of certain reporting practices that, for example, according to the Global Reporting Initiative standards, the Carbon Disclosure Project is another initiative. But reporting your emissions is very different from pledging to reduce your emissions to zero, which many corporations have done recently. So I want to ask you, how credible are the pledges that have been made, and how do you assess their credibility? Because they are such large polluters, many companies have an enormous influence on our climate. So I think as climate conscious people, we need to get some guidance on the basic tools on how to assess whether a net zero pledge is credible and what we can do before it's too late to pressure corporations to honor their pledges.
Yeah. I guess the straight way to do it is just to keep them accountable and check on them. So what we can do is companies have to come up with annual reports. So we check those annual reports, and I know this is not for everyone, maybe like, but there are certain NGOs maybe that like Kami, or I think Missy Solidarity. These are the the new upcoming younger generations, younger than me at least, that are doing really great work in like putting up these infographics from this like very technical jargon documents and putting it out for the public digestions. So I think like just following um, this kind of social media accounts, and if you are capable of yourself, then you can do it. You can do it also by your own. Check these companies. But yeah, definitely that's one of the things. It seems pretty tedious, but yeah. Jasmine, you want to add anything?
Yeah, but not so much on the reporting bit though. I'm not a reporting person, but just to sort of give like an insights or like glimpse on what we could expect for the future, because we're talking about investors, we're talking about corporates, but also there's a big future in terms of renewable energy. And I also remember a couple of months ago, if you're keeping up with like global updates, even big oil and gas companies are making their just transition, or like the transitional shift. There was this phrase which went around saying like, oh, the big oil is having a bad day because the top three, I think Chevron, Shell, and ExxonMobil, they were going through this phase where I think Chevron, they demanded the limit to the scope 3 emissions, and then Dutch court ruled Shell to cut their emission by half, and then even the ExxonMobil shareholders voted in to have climate people as their board members. So even at that level, they are thinking about like what's going to happen, and the main key stakeholders, like what are their invested interests in, even in the oil and gas sectors. And in Malaysia, there are also examples of offshore being labeled as stranded assets because in the long run it's just not profitable to invest in oil and gas. So it's now is the time to look into solar energy and other renewable energy. And in the future, there's no longer going to be green jobs. It's because green jobs is essentially the jobs of the future. Everything is going to be green jobs. So I know I'm talking to university students here. So maybe perhaps think about what kind of career path you want to go into. Come talk to me, Sakina, Reza. We're happy to share more besides this webinar.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Jasmine, for adding that and highlighting the shift of fossil fuel companies towards renewables, which, I found it personally interesting that one of the largest funders of research into algae as a biofuel is ExxonMobil. But some commentators have also mentioned that this is another discourse of delay. It's pushing a non-transformative solution. For example, it would take a production facility many times larger than several states of Malaysia to produce even the output of a single oil refinery, because it just takes a lot of biomass to produce fossil fuels. So although we see fossil fuels moving into renewables, like at least in some part of their portfolios, or maybe to hedge the risks, as long as they keep making most of their money from the sale of or extraction of fossil fuels, I wonder, can these industries be sustainable by definition? If, for example, most of their income and profit comes from the same extractive economic activity, i.e., fossil fuel extraction.
I think as long as there is fossil fuel, there's going to be corporations trying to dig for it, and as long as policies across the world is still like we're still using fuel cars, there's still demand for it. Yeah, definitely. They can sustain by it, and I think we can see a lot of like a boom in fossil fuel when fossil fuel was first introduced, like somehow everything like moved to fossil fuel from coal at that time, right? And I think like right now, that's what we need. We need a boom to renewable energy. So although it's definitely not a perfect, I guess, perfect. So sorry, so it's not a perfect yet, the renewable energy. I think there's a lot of arguments still about it, like for example, so like making of solar panels still uses chemicals and stuff like that. And then the batteries for electric cars does pollute. So there's definitely room for more improvement, which I think these big fossil fuel companies have the money for. They have all the they can do R&D. So that's what we need right now. Move from them. I think I just want to mention, like, just because Jasmine mentioned just now about the fossil fuel industry, that Shell actually this year, 2021, is still investing like 5 times more in oil and gas than in renewable. And also, not just that, their renewable investment is lower than their marketing and investment. So you can tell that that's what their priorities is, to kind of show that there's the marketing is more important than renewable energy itself. So it kind of shows greenwashing there, right there. So yeah. Anything I missed, Reza? Sorry.
Nope, I think we're doing great. So to wrap up the section, like Sakina is emphasizing that no matter how big or small the company, we must not surrender to climate change. It's not about just holding the largest emitters responsible, but it seems also driving a structural change from below, like in terms of the way that we approach the purchases we make, the decisions we make, for example, to drive a car or not. And these issues are, of course, systemically linked, and we could talk about them forever because they're systemic. But we do have a final section, so it's about the people power. So Sakina, as a Greenpeace campaigner, like Greenpeace has used people power throughout its history to create the change it wants to see. So what can we do, or what can the audience do as young students, budding climate activists, for how to pressure governments and companies to act more responsibly on the environment?
I think I want to give example of what we have already done. So just to give a little bit of hope, like I mentioned at the beginning, I mainly work on the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve issue, which is a local forest issue. If you guys haven't heard about it yet, please Google it. It's all over. Kami Misi Solidarity. So if you follow the issue, you would know that we recently quote unquote won. So we still need to monitor the situation, because what the issue is that the land, which is the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve, which is a peatland forest, is quite a rare forest type, which is a huge carbon sink, water catchment area, green lung for KL, very near to Cyberjaya area. It was going to be degazetted. What degazette means is they want to change the status of the land. So it's from a forest reserve, they want to change it to mixed development. So we knew about it in early 2020. We campaigned about it, and then a pandemic happened, and then in September they did a public talk to ask for our opinions, and I was there. Everyone, when you say everyone there, didn't agree with the degazettement. There was not one person that said yes, let's degazette. And then after that, Reza, you were there too. I met you there. And after that session, somehow we keep campaigning, and doing online social media pushes and stuff like that, because we can't do anything offline yet at that time. And then somehow in late August, we just found out that they have already degazetted it behind everyone's back, way back in May, I think, way back in May of 2021, without telling anyone. And then the status of the land has already been changed. So I actually even went to the Jabatan Peta Negara, Peta Jupem, and actually printed out the new maps. So yeah, it's and then everyone was quite shocked and feeling helpless at the time. And I wouldn't be I wouldn't put a I was also sad at that time, of course, because like I've been working on the issue for a while, and it's it's yeah, it's very devastating at the time. But yeah, we didn't give up. We push and push, and then we keep doing social media storms, Twitter storms, keep putting infographics. Yeah, very much a lot of it was kami and Missy, part of the coalition called PHSKLU, so Pertahankan Hutan Simpan Kuala Langat Utara. We did a lot of those. And then somehow magically, I don't know, I'm still pinching myself actually now, but like on the 9th, if I'm not mistaken, 9th September, just early this month, the decision to the Gazette has been revoked. So now they're saying, okay, we're going to put back the status as permanent forest reserve. So yay, but it was still a statement. Like, you know, because of course we're going to keep monitoring whether they're actually going to change back the title and all the other promises that they have given. But I just want to say this is like one of the quite big win for Malaysian environmental movement. Even GEC actually is part of PHSKLU. This we're doing donations, I think, for GEC right now, right? So yeah, GEC is a big part of PHSKLU, and Faisal, the director, actually said like, yeah, he's been in the environmental industry for a while, and he mentioned that this has been unprecedented. So I just want to say like people power works. So whether you think you're just tweeting or I'm just like posting this, is it really gonna make any difference? Don't think that way. You know, it does make a difference, and you just need that one spark. And we can, well, no, we don't want to start an actual fire, but we want to start a, you know, activism fire. Yeah.
Well, we definitely do not want any fires in Kuala Langat. It's a peat swamp, so highly susceptible to forest fires. But thank you so much for sharing that, Sakina. And because we have an upcoming Q&A session, I'm sorry we didn't get to discuss this final section more. I would love to hear Jasmine's input as well about how UNICEF pressures governments to adopt the policies they want to see, especially for youth. Hopefully that can come up in the Q&A. So I think the questions will flash up anytime now. So let's just hold, yeah, hold tight. Okay. So the first question, which the student admits is a bit of an odd question, but I'll read it out anyway. For balance, what would we as a community, nation, economy, or etc., not just at the individual level, have to sacrifice to go green? So this is looking at it from the opportunity cost side, so emphasizing the downsides basically. So are we willing to make any of those said sacrifices, if any? So this question has two parts: the sacrifices needed and whether we'd be willing to make them. So Jasmine, maybe you can go first if you feel comfortable with this.
Yeah, sure. I guess I won't go into details lah, but I think just reflecting upon our general SDG framework, the Sustainable Development Goals, with sort of prioritize three key areas, which is people, planet, and profit, and how do we balance the three to live equitably and sustainability, so that we have a better future for everyone. I think in this sense, to simply put, we have a lot of opportunities to decarbonize and to pursue a deep decarbonization pathway as a country. We do have all the alternative industries in place. We also have policies in place. In fact, I would say that Malaysia is actually really good at making policies. We just fall a bit short in terms of implementing policies. We have a lot of policies actually. I won't go into a very detailed elaboration on it. But I think this is where I think Sakina can elaborate a bit more on like opportunity costs, since that's a bit of your area, and you pressure a lot of corporates and governments. For us at UNICEF, we collaborate and we partner, and we alongside to support and strengthen the policy, and which is where we put a lot of effort in terms of contributing technical input, expertise, not just on the country office level, but also leveraging on regional and also at the global level. So that's where we come in to look at climate and environmental issues through a multi-sectoral lens, particularly lens from the most marginalized and most vulnerable.
Yeah, if I can jump in. So the question is a good question, but I think I would phrase it a different way. Like, if we don't do it, what would we lose? You know, we lose our future generation. We lose a lot of stuff, like a lot of economic value is not seen as a holistic approach. Like, yeah, you see that we're losing it at this time here, but if we have, let's say, a huge flooding event, how much do you think the money that we're losing there, not just individually, like, you know, governments usually send, you know, over help to these communities whenever it's hit. So it's not a cheap endeavor. So I think instead of looking at it as like a in silos of, okay, when we need to do this and move towards that, it costs a lot of money, maybe we shouldn't do it. But you don't see the effect afterwards, like what is it mitigating. And you know, from that mitigation, like even like corona, the covid right now, it's a huge cost, right, to do a lot of this vaccination. We do quarantine, we do, you know, all this stuff. We have to expand quarantine centers. Hospitals need a lot of money. This is another, like, it's an opportunity cost on the other side. So you might not see that right now, but there are a lot of economic value that we're mitigating by moving away from, you know, climate this yeah, we need to maybe not call it go green, but yeah, climate costs, I guess.
Sakina, your elaboration actually reminds me of a phrase which goes by the cost of inaction is greater than the cost of action. If we do, which simply translate is that if we don't do anything, it'll burn a bigger hole in our wallet than when we actually do something.
Okay, if I can add my something that I thought in Sakina's elaboration is, this is not the hottest year on record. This is the coolest year for the next 100 years. That's another way of illustrating the cost of inaction, right? If we have to wonder to ourselves, like when we think about the cost of taking climate action that is emphasized, is this cost distributed? Is it distributed in a way that affects us directly, or does it affect certain actors with a vested interest in keeping the economic system running as it does now? So thank you very much for sharing on that question, and I hope we answered that. We're ready for the next question, if that can be flashed up right now. So Aina Norazi has asked us for examples of policies, and why is it difficult for Malaysia to implement them? So I think in this, okay, so in Malaysia, environmental policies, we can't like avoid talking about the federal constitution here in any discussion, because there is a separation between the federal, the power of the federal government and the power of the state government. The state controls water and land, and including forests, and the federal government controls, you know, biodiversity and orang asli welfare. So all of these elements are needed for holistic sustainability. But what are the difficulties? This is something that I'd really like to hear from both of you. So anyone want to go first?
Yeah, okay, I'll go first. You mentioned like federal and state, the divide, right? So I think the great example would be like Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve, because forest is falls under state and not federal, even though, let's say, federal have a good policy on it, but it doesn't matter because state is the one that makes the decision. And even like on a state level also, like I might share that we did convince the in Adon sitting last year in November, if I'm not mistaken, for them to vote on usul. So usul number 26, if I'm not mistaken, that says basically it says take care of all forest reserve in Selangor as a water catchment area, and so no degazetment basically. And then it was unanimously passed actually. But the thing is, even though it was unanimously passed, it's not legally binding or anything. So when we question, you know, Amiruddin, our MB for Selangor, that, you know, this thing already passed, so why are you still talking about degazetment at that time? He says, you know, it's not legally binding, so technically I don't really need to listen to it. So that's one of the problems. It's like a loophole in our system, I guess, that needs to be somehow addressed. But yeah, at this moment, it might seem like a little bit big to tackle at the moment. But yeah, definitely NGOs and CSOs are talking about these gaps and how we can address and try to fill it in. When you say example of policies, I think for me, just layman, like a easy example I can give is remember when we had a plastic straw ban, and like we still go to mama and like, okay, people are still giving out straws though, and because there's a loophole there, it's a lot of it like the implementation is very hard to do because the culture is also still very, we're so used to it by now, although there was a time when we're not used to straws, but now we're so used to straws that is part of daily life. And even though say it's banned, there's still some loopholes like, oh, if customer requests it, we still give it out. But technically some I've seen this personally, like I didn't request a straw, but it was still given. So you still have to kind of refuse it. Even when we refuse, sometimes they forget and still give it. So how do governments like implement this on like, the level at that level at like the mamas and all the restaurants, right? It's very difficult. Like how do they send officers there all the time to check? This is not very doable. So yeah, that's one of the, I guess, gaps. And what we need is like a culture change, a mindset change, which takes a long time, yes, but it is very doable. And I think government needs to put more action into those mindsets change. Like remember those when I was in school, they had like 3R programs, and everyone is like, recycle, let's recycle. Or there was a anti-dada program on, no roko program. There was a lot of these things, and it helped change mindsets, especially when you do it at, at the sekolah level. It's very good to target the young minds. I think, I don't know, Jasmine, do you want to talk about the young minds a bit?
Yeah, can. And thank you so much, Sakina. I think you really did explain that really nicely. And I have actually nothing to add on beyond that. But I think I just want to like highlight because I was a part of this Twitter Spaces that was organized by Aidil and Iqbal about a week ago. And one of the panel speakers who is a representative from the OKU community from this organization called Bully Space actually highlighted one of the shortfalls of the banning of the plastic straws, for example, because so this is where I feel macam when policies are being implemented, it doesn't take into account holistically everyone's voices, right? Including like not just to mention children, but also persons with disabilities community. If any of you are listening here, correct me if I'm wrong now. I'm just re-quoting what he shared, but basically Sean from Bully Space mentioned that one of the reasons plastic straws came about is to ease people with disabilities for them for them to be to drink for them to have access to drinks, right? But because of now the policies, I think it also goes beyond just like the climate crisis or environmental crisis. We are moved by pictures, right? And I know that this one year, the picture of the turtle and the straw that was being stuck in the turtle, I think that is a very vivid image in everyone's head. And that kind of like startled the global community to sort of make a shift into further researching on plastic pollution within the ocean and also in our rivers. But what the point that I'm trying to make is that when it comes to certain policies, bearing in mind climate policies, environmental policies, it should take into account the voices of all these communities, because at the end of the day, the end user will also be these population within our society.
I just want to real quick. Sorry.
Okay,
Jasmine, when you mentioned that the straw was initially made for disabilities, yeah, and I just the thought come to my mind. Like I remember that manual versus auto cars right now. Like I know that automatic cars are designed mostly for person with disabilities actually initially, and then it's, I guess, by convenience or something, then it's adopted by the public. I think that's same kind of narrative. Like a lot of it is like because it's convenient, then people start using it, and it's more automation in our life, I guess. But I think we maybe not saying anything about automatic cars, but maybe we need to be more, be more willing to be a little bit inconvenienced here and there.
Yeah, it's also like, reflecting upon your own individual choices. So if you are able to, and if you can, if you have the privilege to shift towards the more sustainable lifestyle, then by all means do so. But this does not discredit or disvalue those who actually need it, because I'm also reminded by this one tweet by Evelyn from the Third World Network. She said that actually individual action is very exclusive, whereas systemic change at a higher level is more inclusive, which means that, like, I have the convenience, I have the means to access all these options for a more sustainable lifestyle, but that does not mean this implies to other populations of the community.
Well, thank you so much for the sharing, and it's been an honor today to moderate for Jasmine, also a former focal point of MYD, and Sakina. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad that we got to see the perspectives of how environmental policies are created, both from the perspective of a multilateral organization like the UN, which supports and tries to strengthen policies, and Sakina more from the civil society and coming from the outside in, rallying support for environmental causes. I think that with the perspectives that you occupy from the positions that you work at, I personally found the sharing very interesting. So as wrap up this forum and session one, like clearly the responsibility for addressing greenwashing, which is, I guess, the general theme of this session, it lies on being informed. It lies on also sharing information, bearing witness when you can, basically calling out things that are wrong when you see them happening, and also to pressure governments and corporations to do more, because you have a stake in the future that we will all live in or live through together. So thank you so much for the time, and I'll hand this over back to the MCs at UMW. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Once again, these were our speakers, Ms. Jasmine Irisha from UNICEF, Ms. Sakina Homa, and as well as our moderator, Reza. Thank you so much for your time. Right now, we are going to take a 10-minute break so that you guys can take your time and process all the information, quite a lot to process. We'll be back around 4 p.m. Don't go anywhere though, as we will be having a performance by Bill Musa. So we'll be having a break now. Thank you. Hello, welcome back, everyone. Hope everyone enjoyed their break. Now we will move on to the performance by Bill Musa. Hi, Bill Musa.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good.
All right. Would you
Hope
like
you've
to test your
been
mic?
having a good show so far.
Yeah, so far pretty good, pretty good. Would you like to test your mic?
Yeah, so you can hear this, obviously.
Yep.
I'm
Sounds
gonna
really
play
good.
something. Can you hear that?
Yep. Sounds
The
good.
music?
Mm-mm.
Okay, cool. I think that's it.
Yep.
So you could hear the music, right?
Yep. All
Okay,
right.
should.
Are you ready?
I'm ready, yeah.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Musa.
Hi, everybody. You can call me Bill. I hope you've been having a very insightful session so far. Hopefully, we know now what we can do as individuals for sustainability. And by the end of this event, we'll be very educated about sustainability. But before that, this is 4 a.m. When we were together, I loved our exchange of jokes. What hurts the most about being alone? I really hate laughing on my own. 'Cause we used to laugh and laugh and laugh. Can I have those memories back? I accepted that I'm not her destination, but part of the journey, part of the preparation. 4 a.m., 4 a.m. What a beautiful morning, what a beautiful sight. To look in the glass and see yourself cry. 4 a.m., 4 a.m. What a beautiful morning, what a beautiful view. To look in the mirror and only see half of what's left of you. I woke up again last night and tried to reach out to her. I'm sorry I raised my voice. I'm sorry I made you think I'm a liar. The fire in me that burned for you changed after what we went through. And now the fire feels like hell. I miss you so, I miss your smile. 4 a.m., 4 a.m. What a beautiful morning, what a beautiful sight. To look in the glass and see yourself cry. 4 a.m., 4 a.m. What a beautiful morning, what a beautiful view. To look in the mirror and only see half of what's left of you. How do I let you go? 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 My favorite part. Yes, that was 4 a.m. Hope you all enjoyed that. So before my last song, my second and my last song, I just want to say thank you so much to IUMW for inviting me, to Green Over Smokescreens for having me, and yeah, I hope you enjoy this performance, and I hope you enjoy this next one. This next song is called No More Excuses. It's one of my more, hype songs. But it has a really, really meaningful story behind it. And it's not really a story, basically it's a PSA, saying you need to get your together, okay? So this is to us getting our together. This is No More Excuses. Hang out with the guys, float about your life, playing games at the CC, like you did when you were 15. Moving on to bigger things, using all your cash on gambling. Fail to plan, you plan to fail, just living life day to day. You think that nobody loves you, you blame everything on everyone. Scared of what you might become, thinking you're the only one. Everybody's got obstacles, it counts how you perceive the world. You always think life is rough, you never seem to grow up. I don't know what else to say, you can't take all your problems away. Girls will only add to that, but I will always have your back. You can only run so far, the gas will run out in your car. Are you gonna stay and listen? Are you gonna stay and listen? You think that nobody loves you, you blame everything on everyone. Scared of what you might become, thinking you're the only one. Everybody's got obstacles, it counts how you perceive the world. You always think life is rough, you never seem to grow up. You think that nobody loves you, nobody loves you, nobody loves you. You never seem to grow up, you never seem to grow up. Excuses, no more excuses. Excuses, no more excuses. Excuses, no more excuses. Excuses, no more excuses. It's all up to you now. Only you can decide what you want to make of your life. Pick up the slack, take your life back. Stop making excuses, thinking you're useless, thinking you're useless. You think that nobody loves you, you blame everything on everyone. Scared of what you might become, thinking you're the only one. Everybody's got obstacles, it counts how you perceive the world. You always think life is rough, you never seem to grow up. You think that nobody loves you, nobody loves you, nobody loves you. You never seem to grow up, you never seem to grow up. Sing it with me. Excuses, no more excuses. Excuses, no more excuses. Excuses, no more excuses. Excuses, no more excuses. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm Bill Musa. I will see you guys on Instagram. Thank you so much to the hosts as well, and to Green Over Smokescreens.
Thank you so much, Bill Musa. Do you mind if I take a photo? Just
Of
the two
course,
of us?
Ken.
All right. Come. My friend here is a big fan over here. His name is Jeffrey.
Okay. Hi.
All right. I'm gonna screenshot. All right, 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Bill Musa. A very, very wonderful performance. Hope everyone enjoyed that. We will now move on to the second module, which is under the name of the Green Dependent Way. We have two speakers. Firstly is Mr. Aidil Iman. He is an advocate for environmental justice, climate action, and nature conservation. And as well as Miss Nick Suzila from Cloth Malaysia Sendirian Berhad. And this will be moderated by Miss Fatin Hamza from Youth United for Earth. Let's welcome our speakers, shall we?
Hi, thank you, Nick. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon lah, everybody. I hope you had your lunch and tadi dah dengar Bill Musa nyanyi-nyanyi. And now we're ready to listen attentively lah to our amazing speakers today. And today we have number one, Nick Suzila. May I call you Suzy?
Just call me Suzy.
Yes, Suzy from Cloth Cares, and we have also Aidil from My Hutan and Malaysian Youth Delegation. Ooh. Okay, I'm Fatin from Youth United for Earth, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much to our speakers for being here and wanting to share your opinions and thoughts on our topic today, the green dependent way. So apa yang greennya? The word green is like used everywhere kan. Semua orang nak guna perkataan green tu. So tapi green ke tidak? So we will listen to our speakers about their very own green journey and how their green journey as an individual has evolved throughout the years into something bigger. And also thank you to our audience for being here. I'm guessing there's plenty of young people here. There's plenty of students here. Thank you for being here, to learn new things or maybe to unlearn and also relearn some things as well. Okay, so this is how this session is going to work. We will have 3 rounds of me asking questions to our panelists here, and we will be having a question and answer slot at the very last bit of this session. So if you, our audience, listening, if you're listening via Facebook, if you're listening via YouTube or LinkedIn Live, and you have any question, feel free to just post your questions anytime throughout this whole session in the comment section. Okay, enough of me talking. Now we chit-chat with our panelists. I will start with you, Suzy. Okay. Our topic today is the green dependent way. So I think everybody has their own starting point where they feel like, okay, I need to be, kinder to the environment, or I need to care more about the environment. And for you, Suzy, what was your starting point and what was your journey like? How did you come about with Cloth Cares?
Right. First of all, thank you very much for having me, and good afternoon to Fatin, Aidil. Aidil's very popular, by the way. One of Cloth team member was like, Suzy, I saw your poster together with Aidil. I said, yes, I am, but I don't know him yet. I know him because he's quite popular on social media. Like, he's really popular in our generation, Suzy. And I actually Googled you, by the way. So yeah, just so you know, we didn't have the chance to. Okay, anyway. So, all right. So, I am very privileged to be here today because I'm joining the young generations, and I myself am having fun because, the way we do things. I am 42 years old this year, by the way. So my perspective about a lot of things may be different journey than yours, because my generation, there wasn't much internet, and then the webinar wasn't really there at first. But to put it in a nutshell, how I got myself into this is because I was working for a media company whereby I was involved directly in green projects. So, if you heard about this business newspaper, it's called the Malaysia Reserve. So back then, the Malaysia Reserve, they have a pullout. It's called the International New York Times. So the International New York Times, they don't have an office in Malaysia. So we run the distribution, circulation, promotions for them. And, they used to have a lot of events. So back then in 2012, so my boss was like, Suzy, you're supposed to, promote and go to events, which is called Millennium Development Goals. And then back then there was no SDGs yet. There was nothing like that in 2012. So I attended in my capacity as a member of media. So that was when I was like, what's MDG again? Now it's SDG. What MDG 01, whatever not. So when I'm like, so throughout the event, as you know, I told you before that, being in media, I was privileged because I attended thousands of events, literally. But that was one event that I attended with my best friend. She wasn't in media; she's a chartered accountant. So she followed me, and we're like, just before we went back, this is something that it doesn't make sense, but it happened. So I was outside waiting to go back, and then after that, there was this lady, she's a Dutch lady. She was one of the speakers. So I was like, "Hi, my name is Susie." She looked at me as a local, basically. So I was like, "So you are doing this, like, recycled plastic bottle, fabric?" And she's like, "Yeah, in our country, in the Netherlands, in the first world country, this is normal." And I'm like, "Do you know that this is my first time hearing this in 2012, by the way, 2013, sorry. This is something really new to me." So it's like, oh, this is normal. I mean, around the world. I mean, she was like, big brands, are embarking into this initiative. So I went back home with my best friend. We're like, for real, plastic can be turned into fabric. So my starting point was because of my job, that I had a full-time job back then, and now I'm a full-time social entrepreneur. How I got myself into it is because I was just amazed. Like, seriously, this woman, a Dutch lady in my country, coming to speak on sustainability, was wearing recycled plastic bottle fabric. And then after that, on the baseline of it, how I got myself into it is because I know what I want, I know what I don't want. So I studied accounting, I was practicing audit firms, I was in the media, but I know that those were just a journey in my life. In the end, I know that at one point, I want to work for myself. I want to have my own voice. I don't want to be reporting to bosses, especially there's a gap. You know what I mean, right? Like, if you're at a certain level in your organization, for instance, you're a general manager in your organization and you're a bit young. And then you have to report to your bosses who are way older than you, and they don't understand your language, and they don't understand, the way that we do things. So there's a gap. So I told myself that, what? Let's give it a shot. And just, just do research. If you feel that's what you want, you're not happy, everything that you do, so gamble. So I gambled in 2013. We started cloth, but I was only full-time with cloth in 2018. So that's my story. Started with someone wearing something really nice for recycled plastic bottle, and that was the founder of Wish to Wear. Hand it over to you.
Wow, I love your energy.
Oh, thank you.
Good vibe. Maybe you want to cerita a bit lah. What is cloth cares actually?
Okay.
Yeah.
Cloth cares. Okay. Cloth Cares is a brand. Okay, but what brand is that? Okay, again, I like to read. Basically, whenever I have my free time, I get very restless. So when I read, I get very happy. So one day I was really lucky because I was Googling some keywords about fabric recycling, about keywords on the internet, and suddenly something pop up. A word movement, you see? Like, okay, a word movement. And then at the same time, when we first started cloth in 2013, cloth was named Cloth Malaysia in Berhad. Well, we didn't have cloth cares, like cloth cares, cloth, where we didn't have that. But what happened is that, in 2017, Lot 10 shopping gallery, right? So they reached out to us, they said that we want to run recycling campaign. It's like, what recycling campaign? We do plastics because we started with plastics. And she said, no, I want to do fabrics. I know jack about fabrics. So I was like, okay, so from selling fabrics made for recycled plastic bottle into a movement, as in like, how do you do that? At that time, there was no movement. I didn't know what was movement. I told you, I studied accounting. I was in the media. I don't know all this stuff. It's zero knowledge. It's like, and then after that, I was like, okay, so Lot 10 wanted to launch fabric recycling. So I can't call Cloth Malaysia recycling, right? It doesn't make sense. So I'm like, Malaysians don't care about recycling because they see it just giving to marginalized community, but they don't understand all these carbon emitting gases. I'm like, so I told my partner, Cloth Malaysia is the name of the company. Cloth Cares, cloth, you care about it. So that's the meaning of it. But later on, I was in Thailand, remember. This was really amazing. I told you about, I was Googling some keywords, and then I realized that around the world, in the first world country, how they change policy, especially for plastics, is through movements. Gerakan, right? So you get people with the same mission, vision, and like-minded people. You create a stakeholders group, and then that's what you are. So Cloth Cares is basically, I care about cloth. Cloth Cares Fabric Recycling Movement is a movement that is, we are getting everyone aligned with one objective, keeping things out of the landfills. So that's what it is. It's a movement brand.
Wow, that's so cool. It's a brand, but it comes with the activism punya feeling, So
Kinda. Well, that's what you get when you work for the media industry, you know. Like I told you
Yeah.
before, like yesterday, you work in the media. What is understated in the media industry is that every day you meet so many people, you talk to so many people, you learn. But you know, like I told you, I was lucky because of that keyword. You like, I was researching my movement is the single most important thing to change policies in any countries, especially waste management.
Right, that's so cool. And it also shows that, Susie, you showed to everyone that everyone can play a role despite our backgrounds, right?
I don't know anything about recycling. I told you that.
Yeah,
I fall in
yeah.
love with the t-shirts. I'm like, like a fan, you know, like that Dutch lady was like, what's wrong with this lady? I'm like, I don't think my people in my country know that polyester is made from PET bottle. I don't think people in my country know that, you know, like your polyester, if you throw that into the landfills, it will take 200 years to decompose. You see, that was 2013. I didn't know. Just like you, anyone.
Amazing, Susie, amazing. Okay, we'll move on to you, Ideal. I have somehow a similar question for you, Ideal. So most of us know that you are a young, brave environmental climate advocate. Macam Susie cakap tadi, popular.
Very popular,
So,
very popular. It's like, Susie, you don't know?
how did you start your journey, Ideal? And how has your journey been as a young environmental and climate advocate? To you?
Right. So thank you so much for inviting me today for this session. I'm really glad and very privileged and lucky to be here speaking about activism in terms of youth participation, right? So I think when I started doing it, I started doing advocacy for the environment and climate and biodiversity and was like around 3 years ago. So I started with, you know, sharing information about wildlife, specifically wildlife that we don't know much about. For example, I think when you ask Malaysians, they would say like their answers of local wildlife species would be Malayan tigers, elephants, tapirs, right? But there are other species in Malaysia that deserve the same attention. You know, like for example, the seladang, the binturong. And there are amazing species who are also facing the same levels of extinction. You know, so I think I started with that kind of narrative, and I started loving wildlife first. And then, you know, what inspired me to progress towards, you know, climate justice and environmental justice was the fact that I saw a relationship between human rights struggles as well as environmental degradation. For example, for fast fashion, we know that it is one of the most polluting, you know, industries, and we know that, you know, carbon emissions from the industry is high. We know that they use, for example, they use polyester that could shed microplastics into the ocean when we wash it, and so on. But there are also labor related issues when it comes to fast fashion, where women who are young are working in unsafe conditions at their factories, right? So, for example, the cases of like the plazas that have collapsed, housing laborers who are working for brands like Mango, Zara, and so on. So I saw a relationship between how human lives are also impacted when it comes to things that are eco dangerous. You know, so that's what really inspired me and kept me going, because I'm not a scientist. So I'm not a person studying STEM. You know, I'm not a person studying conservation. I am furthering my degree soon, and so I allow myself to speak on a platform or in a conversation where people can understand. You know, sometimes climate change can be such a heavy subject, like full with jargons and scientific terms. So I try to make sure that it's a problem that can be accessible in terms of, like, for example, how can climate change affect weather patterns? We know that floods are becoming more extreme because of climate change. We know that droughts are becoming more extreme because of climate change. So I explain to people, how does those scenarios of extreme weather like floods and droughts are affecting human lives? They're affecting farmers, rice farmers particularly. They are causing anger-related issues from heat waves. They are causing mental health problems. They are causing losses of coastal communities. So I explain to people mostly on a human-centric level, where they can understand and say that this is a problem that's going to affect me directly. So far, it's been really great. Just last year, I joined And I believe when I was interning at Bank Rakyat, I did contact Cloth Cares for a bin to place a bin, but I don't think they have placed a bin already at Bank Rakyat. I don't think they
Not
have.
yet, not yet. Oh my
Yeah,
God, thank
yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was the person who emailed to them and everything.
Oh my God, really?
So that's like how I know Nick Suzula from Cloth Cares, as well as Cloth Cares, and one of the platforms that I use on Twitter to share people about fabric recycling is through Cloth Cares and other fabric recycling options. So I guess like in this kind of world of environmentalism, everyone, if they don't know each other, they support each other's work. And they always promote each other's work, right? Like today's event. And I think I've been really lucky. So just last year, I joined My Hutan, which is a movement under Undi 18, as well as the Malaysian Youth Delegation. Both are youth-led and youth-focused. So I'm really excited because so far I've been doing it alone. But right now I have great friends who are like-minded and very participatory in those two NGOs. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yay, cool.
Mm.
I really like the fact that you're using social media to, like you said, mainstream this whole conversation about environment, you know, like making it cool, look cool as well. Because kalau dia tak cool, orang takkan cakap pasal environment kan? So thank you, Idol. You're really having that niche, which is really great. Okay, to our audience, if you have any questions regarding our topic today, the Green Dependent Way, write your questions, in the comments of our Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn Live. Okay, Susie, back to you. Susie, you mentioned about your journey, like, you know, as an individual, like you have that wow realization, hebatnya daripada Netherlands, and then you were like, okay, we need to do this in Malaysia, kan? So it kind of like grew into something bigger. And now that you have your own social enterprise. So as the co-founder of Cloth Cares, how do you think like people, the public, can live more sustainably, especially when it comes to fashion?
Fashion is actually very personal. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Fashion means many things to people. Okay, number one is that you got to wear something anyway, or else the police going to catch you. I'm going to call the police to catch you. You need to wear something. So meaning, you know, wearing something is a must, or else you go to the police. Number two, so it's for safety as well. You know, safety in the sense that if you don't wear certain type of clothes, I mean, you can't enter a building, right? Or, you know, it depends on weather as well. You see, you don't wear a bikini, I mean, you know, when it's snowing, right? So there's very reason why you know, we buy garments, you know, clothing, and also for fashion as well. I mean, for image, for style, to show off, to show that, you know, you believe in certain religion, or, you know, like there's many. So what I'm trying to tell you is that, first of all, fashion shopping is extremely personal. So what you need to do is you need to know yourself, in a sense that, you know, there's billions of people in this world, right? So you imagine if everyone is not selfish in the sense that they like to buy cheap stuff and they wear it like 2 times and then they just dispose that, and there's going to be a big problem, right? But quite honestly, that's what's happening. Vast majority of our garments are going into the landfills, and then on annual basis, I mean, this was pre-MCO, the data has it that about 100 billion to 150 billions of garments are produced, pieces of garments are produced annually. However, they said that only about 80 billion are purchased, and the rest of it goes in the landfills, which has not even sold. And then what about post-consumer, the one that we don't want anymore? You know, there's many data statistics. Some said that about 80% goes to the landfills globally. So that is worrying, right? So number one is that, again, it's personal. Number two is that you need to know what you're doing. You need to be conscious about it. You need to educate people. If you don't know, that's why you have no guilt. And knowing yourself also means that you got to ask yourself. I always give the example about Halloween parties. Are you going to attend Halloween parties every day and you're going to wear that, you know, funny looking costume, you see? Why do you have to buy it? If you celebrate Halloween parties for 10 years, so does that mean you're going to buy 10 different garments and that you're going to dispose after single use? So you can't do that, right? So I'm trying to tell you is that you need to know yourself. What is important in your life? How much money do you have? I know for a fact that I have friends who working in credit cards department, insolvency, whatever. Not a lot of people go bankrupt is because shopping as well. So you need to know yourself in the sense that garment should be something. The one that you keep in your wardrobe, is that something that you will wear all the time? Certain things like one-off, for instance, like your ball gown. Do you buy that? I used to, because rental was not really popular back then, but now it's like, I think I will buy my black dresses, but I won't be buying like fuchsia in color and like just for one, after that dispose. So I hope that what I'm trying to tell you is that you need to know yourself, in the sense that how you can be part of it is because you're buying that stuff, right? Before you buy, you got to rethink. So what is it? Who I am? Who am I? What am I going to supposed to do about it? B is that when I said about consciousness just now, and also knowing that, like awareness, education, after you use you don't want something anymore, you have to recycle. The least that you could do. And the meaning of recycle can be many things. Number one is that you can recycle does not mean you have to go into recycling bin. You see, that's totally wrong. No, recycling can also hand me down to your family members. If you were to give, I always tell people that if you're thinking that you're handing it down to someone who's not going to wear it, that's not effective. You might as well put it in a recycling bin. So what I'm trying to say is that you need to be aware. So that's how you become conscious and contribute to the cause.
Right. I think that's a really good tip that people can practice, like be mindful and also know yourself.
Be mindful.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Nanti kita akan try untuk cari kita punya identity and check balik kita punya wardrobe, kena tak dengan identity kita. So yeah, thank you, Suzy. Aidil, to you. So speaking on behalf of young people, kan? So the generation today, we face a whole set of challenges which may be different from previous generation, and one of it is the fact that we have this fear of, or whether, like, thinking whether the earth is going to be livable for the next 50-30 years ke. So there's even a term called like climate anxiety. I think you mentioned just now, to describe the fear and anxiety that young people face, when thinking about the climate crisis. Kan? So as an environmental advocate yourself, how do you think young people can turn their worries into action lah?
Right. I think one of the problems that I think, what is it called, like intergenerational injustice, right? When this sort of like passed down feeling of guilt, this feeling of guilt, dread, depression, anxiety is like passed down onto younger people, and they're feeling like this immense feeling of dread and even perhaps defeatism when it comes to climate change, because when we see the IPCC report, we see like reports by IPBES, they all highlight like extinctions and climate crisis and so on. So they're very like, we embedded to us is that the scenario of the world is like burning, right? We have to treat the world as if the world is burning because it is our literal home, right? But I don't agree on the feeling of guilt should be embedded to us solely as individuals, right? I don't think we should feel really guilty when we order a teh ais limau at mama without a plastic straw, and then the waiter ends up bringing a plastic straw, and you feel like crying and feeling like you feel like so anxious because you feel like I'm oh my god, that's sea turtles, when in fact a lot of like fish, a lot of the marine pollution, some of it is accounted from abandoned fishing gears, as well as mismanaged waste. So it's really about moving away. Of course, common sense matters. Of course, awareness matters. But it's also looking how it's not climate change or biodiversity loss. It's not solely your fault because I am not the one making decisions to cut down forests in Selangor. I don't have that power. I didn't choose to do that. So really, how can you transform that grief, anxiety, anger, depression into action is all about political networking and all about political activism. The hashtag Lawan Protest was really something monumental that really mobilized young people to hold a government accountable. But also the protest against the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve is an example of how public pressure works. Public pressure, public activism does work. They do work. So one of it is by them putting pressure on on Amiruddin Syari, the Menteri Besar of Selangor, putting pressure on Pakatan Harapan, putting pressure on DAP. So they end up making discussions and having a meeting about the de-gazettement of the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve. At the end of the day, they said it will that decision to develop the area has been halted, has been stopped, and that the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve will be re-gazetted, you know? So public pressure does work. So I think this is one of the ways that you can transform your grief, depression, anxiety, and anger into action by constantly voicing your opinions and objections and resistance online, especially on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can do it on multiple ways. But on Instagram, you can share infographics. You know, I think infographics really work well on Instagram. You can share threads and articles on Twitter. You can share a lengthy post on Facebook. Utilizing social media for advocacy is really, really crucial for current generations to capitalize on this. But it's also about networking with your members of parliaments and aduns. One of the things that I've seen done by young people, especially Project Youth and the Coalition for the KLNFR, they all provided email templates for us to send to our members of parliaments and aduns. You know, I always thought that emailing your MPs or your aduns was like an American way. It doesn't work or like whatever, but it does work. You know, and I'm seeing a growth in Malaysia among young Malaysians. They're starting to email their MPs. They're starting to DM their MPs. They're starting to tag their MPs on Twitter and saying that I am not satisfied with this and that you need to do something about it. So I think that's how you convey your anger, is by, because essentially politicians work for us, and they should know that. And by the essence of them working for us is by us constantly putting pressure, constantly questioning their incompetence and criticizing them, and making sure that they do what they should do in terms of governance. I think that's really important for us as young people.
Right, as in exercising our own citizen rights, again.
Right, correct.
Yeah, and also the fact that they actually reply, I'm quite amazed. Like you say, I had this thinking of like, okay, this is the American way of doing it. They're not going to reply, but they actually did. So
yeah, they do.
So that's really great. Okay, cool. So just a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions regarding our topic today, the Green Dependent Way, do write your questions in the comment section of our Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn Live. Okay, this is the final round. Susie.
Yes.
So some might argue that to shift to a more sustainable lifestyle might be a bit hard for certain groups of people. You know, for example, ethically sourced attires might be a bit mahal, or people don't have the time to sort their items for recycling. So what's your opinion on this matter?
I must agree that, okay, let's go into a little bit of education, right? A lot of people ask me, I lost count, thousands of people, Susie, is t-shirt made from recycled plastic bottle expensive? And my answer would be, your definition as expensive and the person next to you are totally different, right? But the general rule is that at the industrial level, at the factory to factory level, for instance, if most of the recycled plastic bottle fabrics are produced either in India or in China. So if you compare to factory level, it's about 20% higher as compared to your normal stuff. But then the problem is that, as you know, in the end, the retailers or whoever's selling those, they mark up like 2, 3, 4, 5, 600%. You see, that's why you always see that. I am in textile industry now, apart from waste management, right? So because I know the cost that we get from China or directly from source, right? When every time I see the prices of products like on the internet, whatever, I'm like, con. Why are you charging this? This price is only like what? The cost is only 35 ringgit, but you are charging this of 500 ringgit and you're selling this online. This is not even brick and mortar, you see? So again, you can be sustainable by finding the right sources. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that you may not be buying products which is made from purely organic items or recycled plastic bottle, but what you can do is that you can start to recycle. You buy normal products, like you can buy H&M. Why not? I love H&M, but the thing is that how you can be conscious about looking after your garments is that usually you don't look after your garments. You just campak that inside your laundry, and then after that, like you have your stains because you mix it up with your red in color t-shirt. And those are behaviors that is within your control, whereby you're gonna prolong the life of your t-shirt, and after that, at the end of its useful life, that's when you're gonna recycle. Let's not, like I told you, why I answered you very technical just now is generally 20% at the factory level. But like I told you, a lot of people, I don't understand. Like, you're so-called trying to be in a space of green, but you're selling your products like, one t-shirt costs 600 ringgit. That is capitalism. To me, it's wrong. I don't believe in it if you have the right intention, you see? So it goes back to that. To answer your question, it does not mean if you don't have the purchasing power, why, what more now? I mean, like, we all have to be very austere about our money, right? Because why? We're just coming up for MCO, man. Like, a lot of people don't even have money to eat. But what you can do, again, like I told you, is to ensure that you recycle or you prolong the life of your clothing so that you don't have to dispose too immediately or find the right person to inherit your garments. Those are the simple things you can do and make a difference.
Right, cool. I like the fact that you mentioned about the economic, point of view, because not everybody is well off to actually.
I find a lot of young people are not in tune with the economy and also how much they earn versus how much they spend. Let me tell you something. If you keep doing that, you're gonna regret that. It's because you'll be working for your credit cards. You're not supposed to do that. There goes your life experiences of traveling the world just because, I want to own this t-shirt, like 2,000 ringgit. I have to show off to my friends, but you can't afford it.
Right.
Buy secondhand.
True. I love thrifting. Cool. Thank you, Susie. Okay, moving on to our very last question to Aidil. So, Aidil, in your opinion, how can we make sustainable living more accessible and inclusive? So maybe you could cerita from the point of view of a student, maybe?
Right, definitely. I think going back into what makes, of course, like there are problems related to, for example, like sustainable fashion. In Malaysia, it's a growing business, but there have been complaints of like how some brands cannot accommodate plus sizes, and then some, of course, some people don't necessarily understand that to make this garment, to pay the workers at the fair wages, to make sure that it's from sustainably sourced materials, can lead to prices that aren't, that are like hundreds of ringgit or like that aren't accessible to them, right? So I think there needs to be a conversation about that, about how, how is this garment made ethically? Is the worker being paid? What sort of like donation is going into conservation and also community uplifting? I think people I don't understand that kind of narrative when it comes to sustainable fashion in terms of prices. But I think to make one of the things that are accessible as students is when it comes to sustainable fashion is, of course, thrifting is one, secondhand clothing, as well as sharing clothes or like swapping clothes is a fun idea. But at the end of the day, it's about the system. It's about how can H&M transform into a more sustainable business? How can they really how can they be reformed? Really, how can they be of a business that is doesn't exploit people, doesn't exploit natural resources, and so on. So, but that is a different whole conversation, and that is very it's a very hard conversation to penetrate as well. But speaking on students, on how students can do this is what I feel like is like, for example, like veganism. We have this idea of a Western idea of veganism where it's about almond milk and so on, right? It's about it's always about the milk of being expensive, but it's more than that. In Malaysia, traditionally and culturally, we have been doing plant-based dishes like rendang mushroom, Chinese food, and Indian cuisines have vegetarian restaurants. So really, we have been pioneering dishes that are culturally important, but also are good for the planet, because they're mostly plant-based. So it's really about going back to our culture and identifying that the fact that these recipes do exist and they are culturally important to us. So I think that's how you make sustainability accessible. You make it really fun in a way that's really culturally approachable. Saying that rendang mushroom is a part of Perak culture, and it's a really something that's really great. I've tasted it; it's so amazing. So I think that's like another narrative that I have to put out for students to understand, saying that we have to go back to our culture and see that there have been, and also going back to, when you go to kampong areas or you go back to your village, right, and you see your grandmother or grandfather or your cousins there, or your aunts and your uncles, they have these kabuns, right? So they have been pioneering biodiversity protection for butterflies and pollinators and bees and bats for a long time. They have these kabuns and orchards dedicated not only for their livelihoods, growing their own food, without going to the supermarket and buying from plastic packaged vegetables or fruits, but instead growing them. But also what they do at their orchards contribute to biodiversity as well. So it's like going back to your kampong and saying that this is something that Malaysians have been doing for a long time. Malaysian parents or Asian parents in general are like almost zero waste. Like, for example, your mother's like, tutup kipas tu kalau tak siapa duduk kat depan, or like tutup lampu tu kalau tak ada siapa duduk depan, ada hantu ke kat situ, or something like that, right? So it's about that kind of thing that parents do that we have to acknowledge is a part of zero waste or less waste. And my mom loves to reuse plastic containers, plastic containers, or bottles. They make use of everything. Yes, it's to because the goal is to use less money, but it's a part of zero waste as well. So it's going back to your roots, really, saying that it's not a thing where it's a Gen Z or millennial thing of zero waste. It's going back to like our grandfathers and grandmothers and mothers and fathers who have been doing this for a very long time. But let's perfect it, right? But let's improve it. Let's also make sure that where you live in an urban area also has more spaces for gardens to grow food and so on. So I think that's really an important narrative that we can put into making sustainability approachable to us.
Right, cool. So sometimes we talk about modernity or development. So we think that plastics is the way to go. Padahal our ancestors back then, they've been using daun pisang, to bungkus nasi lemak and stuff. So it should be coming back lah, all these habits, kan?
You do know that plastic bottle was only mass produced in the 1950s, right?
Yeah.
Plastic bottle, right? You do know that your polyester fabric, the history is that polyester is made to make ropes and for World War II. And the guy, the inventor, his name is DuPont, he committed suicide. And then after that, after World War II, they decided that, to produce garments, which is from organic products such as cotton and a lot others, it is a long process, it's complicated, expensive. So they realized that, those PET or ropes or plastics, they can be turned into a field, your garments at very cheap cost, cost effective. Hence why since 1950s and after that, it has escalated to what it is now. So again, like what I just said, which is true, we didn't have any plastics. That is why you do know that Coca-Cola, the first is a glass. Only later part of the life they use bottles. It's not because they did not want to use bottles. It's because it was not mass produced. You see, there's none in the 1800s, you see. So I like what you said is because I also realized that our country, I'm very vocal about this, by the way. I have a problem with people who like to talk but they do not know history. They don't read, they don't know what they're talking about. This is history that you need to know. The origin of plastics. Since when? What happened after World War? Who invented that? Who patented that? You see? Why is it now we have a lot of it? It's because of industrial.
Right.
And
the fact that it's still here, like the first plastic is still on this earth.
Of course it's still here because it was just invented not long ago. I mean, it takes 200 years. So the first plastic that was produced is still around if it's not recycled, because it takes more than 200 years for it to decompose. You're right. So you do your calculations right.
Ooh. Thank you for enlightening us, Susie.
Yeah.
I think that's all we have for our session for now. I think we can move on to our question and answer slot. Organizer, do we have any questions? Okay, there's one from Facebook, yeah. Is there any way we could implement sustainability in workplace? Susie, maybe you want to take this one?
You know what? I think the best person to answer that is actually Ideal, is because he was the one who reached out to Klaus when he was in bed, right? Yet. Let's hear from
Oh
him.
my God.
And I'm going to answer both ways, right? Because he was the one. He said that I didn't.
But yeah, I think one of the things that you can do is by contacting cloth cares, right? For example, to implement sustainability. So that is one suggestion for corporate sustainability is to contact NGOs. For example, I think there are some I think there's a cloth care bin at Segi Kota Damansara where I studied my diploma actually. So there is
Right.
So so it's kind of, and it's placed at our cafeteria actually. So I've seen students like myself as well engaging, like putting clothes there, fabric, stuffed toys and everything. So that is kind of one of the ways that you can do. This is like a more direct step of how can you implement sustainability by literally contacting cloth cares and saying that I want a bin at my office, so that workers can come and say, when you have this conversation, like for example with your office mate, and say that I have so many clothes, like I don't know where should I sell it, should I throw it out, and then you're like, don't throw it out, let's bring this up to our corporate sustainability department and say, like, how about we implement a cloth care bin here at the office? And it's so that, and it makes it engaging, where like people can come to office and say that, oh, my daughter doesn't want this stuffed toy anymore, so I'm going to give it to cloth cares and everything. So I think that's like a direct step. This is like a very direct step, a very thing that you can literally like Google and say, like, how can I contact cloth cares and make and place the bin at my office? So I think that's one of the ways that you can do it. Other than that, one of the most, like, I think one of the things that are really, that I have been a part of when I was interning at Ben Rakyat was incorporating like the Green Building Index, where a building can be certified as green based on renewable energy, creating more space, like like a green space for their workers and so on. So I think another direct step, other than contacting cloth cares, is also incorporating a green building index for your company. Looking at standards where you can check, okay, this company is powered by solar energy, check, and then this company has a rooftop that is focused on sustainable agriculture, like urban farming, or an urban green space for the workers to detox after like a long day at work. So check that. So there are multiple standards that you can check on the Green Building Index. So these are two steps, very direct steps rather than general vague steps, but these are two steps that I think you should really implement when it comes to workplace. Maybe Susie can answer.
I want to ask you, you know why? Because I told you just now, I got myself into this is because of my job, and I have to do it. You see, International Yacht Time. So we were the partner in Malaysia. So they have this event. Like all sorts of sustainability events, all on ground event. They have roundtables, whatever not. So that was my job to organize. But I was never the person during my time at work when I was in the corporate world. I was never him in the sense that he called someone. I never. So I can't answer as a person. It will be not hypocrite of me. I never done that. And then, yeah.
So action comes from within.
Yeah, I never done that before because it was my job. It was my KPI. I have to organize the roundtable anyway, or else my KPI, there goes my bonus. That's the truth. Yeah, I'd like to speak from my heart. Get used to that, right? Like we all like to speak from our hearts. Let's not pretend. But for me, what I can do is I like what he said as well just now about replying emails. I am very impressed, honestly, because the young generation below 30, generally, I'm very observant about people not replying email because I find it very rude. Very, very rude, especially if you're a politician. I queue up for you for 2.5 hours. You can't even reply my email or whatever you call it, right? Because I do reply emails. I think he can vouch on it. I think you can vouch on that. We reply our emails, right? I knew he did. Yeah, so my role as someone who's in cloth is to reply emails and give you the information that you need. You see, I can answer that. Yeah. So we try to educate people accordingly. So that's what we can do as in my capacity, or my partner or my team members in cloth. And for other people, of course, we've dealt with thousands of people, and I have to say something. The young people are really into green and sustainability, really. And the kind of question that they ask are very in depth. Like some of that I never thought of as well. I'm like, like I'll give you an example. Someone asked me, it's cute. No one asked me before. It's as good as, can I press the t-shirt that is mixed with polyester? And after that, can I recycle it back? How many times? Blah, blah, blah. Most likelihood, these kind of questions are coming from young people.
Very conscious, huh?
Very detailed. Whereas the older ones are usually like, will ask me this question. If I recycle, will it go to the marginalized community? And that's all that they can think about. They don't think about methane gases. They don't talk about carbon dioxide. They don't talk about greenhouse gases. They don't talk about the economies of scale of how much the clothing production is now as compared to the carbon emission. They don't talk about that. They don't see above and beyond that. I always ask people, sometimes I get very like, can you have a broader mindset, in the sense that we ask people, you're always asking about marginalized community. Of course, it's something that we serve, but it's something that we are not proud to tell people that's all that we do. Because to me, giving something to the marginalized community is something that is a must. You see? But I always ask people, so what happens to your unwanted bra or unwanted undergarments? Or example, a lot of people, you wear two-piece bikinis, for instance. How do you recycle that? Are you going to give it to the marginalized community people who they don't swim? That's not important to them. And everyone's like, I just have to mention the two-piece bikini because I get attention when I say that, right? They're like, oh yeah. So I always tell people that you need to have a very broad perspective about life. There's place and time that you recycle that goes to the marginalized community, which is a high quality product. For those which is not really, then it should be recycled accordingly, maybe into biofuel, maybe into fiber reclamation, maybe you refashion, upcycle them, and then when baju kurung, you can make it into what do you call that, when it's really extensively wear and tear. I mean, you can make it into a blouse, whatever you call it. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Susie and Idil. Maybe we can go to the next question. Okay, this is from YouTube, Ezra. Ezra asked, how do we reverse climate change, and what are the most impactful things we can start practice to help reduce the impact of climate change? So maybe ada beberapa yang memang paling penting lah that you think is the most important thing and we can start now.
Declutter, hand me down to your family members who's about the same size with you, or send a cloth bin. Because you know why? Recycling, fabrics, decluttering is something that you can plan. It's not like, I do plastic recycling as well, as you know. I collect plastics now. I mean, I love garbage. I cannot explain why. It's a bit, form of craziness, I guess. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, plastics, the demarcation between behavioral patterns is that if I'm drinking outside and I'm wearing a small bag, right? And I cannot, after I drink, there's no garbage bin. I can't put it inside my small bag. I have to carry, if I buy a Coca-Cola bottle, for instance, I have to carry that until I see the next garbage bin, right? So it's kind of like, the disposal of your bottles is unlike your fabric, whereby don't lie to me, you can actually plan. Okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours the weekend. I'm going to declutter. And after that, I'm going to plan my recycling trip. It's as simple as that.
Right. Okay, declutter.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Idil, maybe 2 or 3 most important things that we can do now.
Right. So I think based on, I'm going really into something that's very, I hope people can digest, is that based on the IPCC report, in order to stabilize the climate, we have to reach a net zero or a real zero of CO2 emissions, to cut down CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions as well. We can't do this when Malaysia is very dependent on coal or basically non-renewable energy. Like coal, we are really obsessed with coal production. Most of our energy comes from coal, and the coal that we have in Malaysia is imported from Indonesia. So there's a problem with the transportation emissions, and then there's the actual emissions to give us energy and electrification, right? Of course, renewable energy is the best way to go when it comes to handling climate change. But based on reports like the IPCC climate change and a special report on climate change and land, some of the suggestions by the IPCC is one of it is of course a plant-based diet, and to do and that is an individual action is very difficult. So I suggest doing it like a meatless Monday, like a day for me. Every Thursday is a day that I don't eat meat. So I'm trying to slowly get into it. But other than that, it's also about pushing reforms like more sustainable agriculture practices, and exercising your democratic rights against development that is not sustainable, like the Dikazat Kuala North Forest Reserve, the Penang reclamation, and so on. So I think those like a great individual actions that you can do. One of the other things that you can do is by constantly supporting NGOs. For example, there's a movement called Weaving Hopes. Actually, weaving hopes. So Weaving Hopes is under climate action, and they're focused on bringing indigenous women from Malaysia to COP26. So COP26 is the most important climate summit in the world, like COP. So it's going to happen in Glasgow. So Weaving Hopes is sending a few representatives of Orang Asli women to educate people in Glasgow and decision makers and policy makers and world leaders, saying that indigenous people need to be a part of policy making, especially when it comes to deforestation and land use changes. So one of the ways that you can help is to donate, because they need a lot of money to go there. They need a lot of money to bring themselves to Glasgow to COP26. So Weaving Hopes, you can, whether it's 5 ringgit, 2 ringgit, 10 ringgit, 50 ringgit, 100 ringgit, just donate. That's one way that you can do. Maybe you can motivate your parents a bit to say like, I need you to donate to this group. So it's a great cause actually. So it's making sure that representation of vulnerable communities is happening at the most important climate summit in the world, attended by world leaders. So let's do that. Let's go to Weaving Hopes today. And my friend Arrow from Climate Action will shave her head if she achieves 3,000 ringgit. So right now she's already 2,000 ringgit 100, like 2,100 ringgit. So if she achieves 3,000 ringgit of donation for Weaving Hope, she will shave her head in commitment to that. So let's do that and see Arrow go bald. I would really like to see that. She wants to do that commitment. So it's a really great idea. It's the same idea that have been done by Sheikh Sadiq, remember, when he shaved his head to receive donations for the people of Muar. So let's do that. Let's go donate to Weaving Hopes. That's one of the, if you have the capacity to do so. If you don't, just spread the poster and say, hey, does anyone want to donate to Weaving Hopes?
Right, cool. So individual action and then collective action. Sama-sama kita buat. Cool. Okay, maybe we can go through the next question. Do you have any other question? Ada tak? The next one. Okay, the next question is from YouTube. Is sustainability affordable? Question mark. Okay. Most people are discouraged to live a sustainable lifestyle due to certain prices of products branded to be green, organic, sustainable. I think we mentioned a bit about this before. Any of you want to talk even more, discuss even more about this? Affordability of green things or green items.
It's sustainable, affordable, most people discouraged to live sustainable lifestyle due to certain prices. Well, we discussed about this just now, okay? 20% higher, but I always tell people, I don't understand unless that, let me be very honest here, right? Because I sell products as well. I mean, if you are as good as, I will buy Tom Ford products because it's great. You see, everything that you see from Tom Ford, you see the quality, you see the stitching, everything, right? It's like, I understand. But there are a lot of retailers. I mean, like you buy from China and then you price that so expensive. I'm like, why? Yeah. So it goes back to, I honestly find a lot of people are taking advantage in the name of green, whereby, oh yeah, this is green, this whatever. Can I ask for the cert? Is it internationally certified cert? Is it GRS? Talk to me. I will ask you. You're going to be dead. And I will email GRS. Is this real from this factory? Is it Ecotech certified? What's the number? So these are, like I told you, it's actually affordable. They're lying to you.
Oh no. I mean,
I'm the one buying 3,000 meters. I can tell you the price. I have clients who buy 3,000 meters of fabric and make into F1 uniform. I can tell you the price, and the price is just 20% higher than the normal stuff. You know, it's compared to Jekyll, I think it's about 10% higher than Jekyll, by the way. So again, this is the real truth about our industry. I'm not really in fashion industry, but somehow I'm just telling you the truth. I don't understand unless you're a great designer that you studied that. I understand why like Hatta Dolmat, he's a designer, right? Everything that he does, I mean, he's designed. That he's a painter, whatever. Not yes, there is a story behind his pricing. Definitely, it's not easy, but you're just buying that and then you just make it into a pencil case. It's so expensive, and then it's like made from plastic bottle. I'm like, why are you doing that?
It's greenwashing.
It's a scam. I'm sorry, I'm not. You have to travel to China and meet all these people. We made boxes before. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm very privileged because I know someone in China whereby the boxes that we do are the same factory where Gucci does their boxes. Your Gucci box is the same place. I know where it is. I'm very lucky to have that. So I'm like, I mean, it's Gucci, it's fine. I understand. I mean, it's a certain brand, but someone may have copied and I know the price. And I'm like, every time I look at boxes, I'm like, how many 100% do you mark up from this? Is even quality? I'm like,
So thank you, Susie, for sharing like how we're going to detect greenwashing from companies, because I think that
first of all, you ask for GRS, Global Recycled Standard Certificate. Global Recycled Standard Cert is like your serum. It has numbers, you have the company, the factory. You have to ask. Number 2, Ecotax, right? You have to ask, can I get your cert? You have to check. A lot of people are lying these days. We've been through all that. Let's not go into negativity, but ask for the cert. If they say that, this is in line with green technology, whatever not, okay, you have to ask them back. Green technology is defined that, your product is defined that in category whereby in which way that you're reducing electricity, carbon, water usage, or natural resources reduction from that product as compared to the normal processes. You have to ask. You can't like green. Okay, green. And after that, you cannot like that. That's why education is important. People need to go to school. Women need to have education. All this stuff are, the whole ecosystem of SDG. Yeah.
Right. Ideal, do you want to add anything on this matter?
Right. I think Suzila really brought up a really important where it's about transparency, right? So I think one of the conversations that happened on Twitter was about this French lace silk undergarment that was like really expensive. But the creator, the designer, mentioned that the workers are local artisans and that they are unionized, meaning they have their own unions of like laborers. They're trained experts in the field. The silk goes through rigorous inspection and certification. The silk is imported directly from farms that can achieve like exacting needs, shipping fees, and other legislation compliances, as well as the cost of labor, maintenance of those machines. So I think sustainability in that sense is of course unaffordable sometimes, but we also have to understand the fact that what goes through behind the process. I just finished my internship at the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, so I understand the processes that are needed to make palm oil as sustainable as possible. But really about it is just about reforming the systems that we have. We live in a capitalist system where it's about profits rather than about comfort and actual living to live happily, and just to have, at the same time, to have what you want at a cost that is affordable to you. So there needs to be a conversation about that. But sustainability itself, I believe, when you talk about sustainable fashion, these clothes do last longer than your basic H&M shirts. They are made they have certifications, and then they have compliances. They use machinery that is well inspected, that goes to that is rigorously used to perfection. So there are behind the scenes processes that we need to look into and need to ask. I think it's important. What Nick Suzila mentioned is that the need to ask, these companies and shops. I think you have to normalize that kind of sense. But sustainable fashion, in my personal stance, or sustainability itself, shouldn't be inaccessible. It should be as inclusive as possible to make everyone feel that they belong to a world where they can enjoy all the fulfillment of life without worrying about their health when it comes to environmental degradation.
Yeah, it's about transparency. It's true.
Right. So always ask, okay? Everybody, ask, and ask.
Ask questions. Do not, ask questions. Read a lot. Be conscious. Know who you are. Life is simple. Don't be fooled because someone is buying at 3,000 ringgit, and you know what? The color, one of the most worrying element about textile production is actually the dyeing process, right? Coloring process, whereby what people do not know is that a lot of dyeing factories, they are not certified, or they are not equipped with wastewater treatment. So that is a big issue, you see. People don't understand, even if a lot of brands, for instance, they're selling at premium, it's something I will buy, by the way. If it is nice, I will buy. Example, a t-shirt which is made from dyed with organic dyes. It's made from flowers, plants, roots. They don't use chemicals. So it makes sense that it's a little bit more expensive. But you have to are you sure? According to you or according to the certification? Who certified you? Can I know what is the name of the body of the union? Can I have the cert? What is the number? You check the website. Is it true? So these are all that. But the thing is that in Malaysia is that not many people know about this, about eco-tax. I realized that what more GRS, people have no idea. We do not know our rights as consumers and buyers. Just like being a rakyat. We need to know what is our rights as a buyers, as a rakyat, as environment is clean. I mean, it's our rights, right? Hello, I don't want, blah, blah, blah. So it needs to be voiced out. So I really support you guys, young people, for doing this, is because I believe voicing out is important. I admire you people because of your initiative. I was just asking you recently, right? Wow, you're doing this, your student council, blah, blah, blah. I support this.
Cool. Thank you so much, Aidil and Suzy, for the tips and tricks. And I think both of you mentioned a lot about action and participate actively, belajar tentang GRS, asking about these brands, and also writing to our MPs, which is really great. It's not just individual action, kita ubah je kita punya habits, but also do something bigger than that, collective action as a whole, as a group. So thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all we have for today. Thank you again, Suzy and Aidil, for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so
Back
much.
to you, Amir.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Wonderful talk. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Aidil Iman, Ms. Nick Suzila, and as well as our moderator, Ms. Fatin Hamza. Ladies and gentlemen, our event has come to an end. Thank you so much for participating, for all your comments, and as well as to our speakers and our moderators. Thank you so much for making time out of your day to join our event. We hope everyone here has learned a lot, especially about the sustainable lifestyle we can all adopt at this particular time. On behalf of the committee, I would like to apologize for any shortcomings. And once again, thank you for coming to this event. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.